With this one, I really think that sweet malt and rum clashes really terribly with that very young and feisty peat. When you're drinking it, you just occasionally just makes you pull a little bit of a face because it clashes that much, but in a really good way. Welcome back, whiskey fans. So we've got another Glenfiddich today. Last time we had the Glenfiddich 12-year-old, the whiskey that every man and his dog has had and loved and fallen out of love with and hated and gone back to, it's Glenfiddich. Today we've got a special Glenfiddich. It's special because it's part of the experimental series. So it's the same range of kind of cask experiments, Glenfiddich trying to do something new and a little bit innovative. So it's the same experimental series where we saw the IPA cask, the XX or XX or 20 or whatever the hell that's called. We've had the Glenfiddich Orchard Experiment very recently. And now we've got experimental series number 4, Glenfiddich Fire and Cane. So this is one it's made it to the supermarkets. It's quite high visibility. It's being pushed quite hard. And I've ignored this for quite a long time. It's been around for a while, but I've never bought it, didn't even really pick it up or look at it. And the reason why I ignored it is because with that name, Fire and Cane, I kind of thought Glenfiddich with a rum cask finish doesn't sound that interesting or that necessary. Glenfiddich's already very sweet. Do we need a rum cask in there? Probably not. But the reason why I ignored this is because I didn't realise that it's actually peated Glenfiddich. But still, we've seen distilleries that normally offer unpeated or very, very lightly peated whiskey try their hand at more heavily peated stuff. And usually, unless you're geared up for making peated whiskey, more often than not, it just doesn't work. Making good peated whiskey is far more complicated than just making good whiskey and then swapping your unpeated malt for peated malt. There's a lot more to it than that. So even once I realised that this was peated Glenfiddich, I still didn't expect that much, especially considering when you get these peated whiskies from unpeated distilleries, their idea of peated is quite often on the tame side. So you kind of expect maybe a Highland Park level of peat or a Bowmore level of peat. Luckily, with this peated rum cask Glenfiddich, it's quite a little bit more peated than that. The specs for this one, the first thing I noticed with this one is that the tube is bloody enormous. So it's a bit of a chunky boy. Next to the Glenfiddich 12, the tube is a lot smaller, but it's a little bit deceptive. When I saw this, to start with, I wondered if this was a litre bottle, because Glenfiddich occasionally do litre bottles, and this kind of looks like that sort of thing. But if I show you the bottle for the 12, we're all familiar with that. Next to the bottle for Fire and Cane, for a start you notice that you've got the traditional green glass on the Glenfiddich 12, whereas you've got the clear glass on the Fire and Cane for some reason. But it's just the bottle shape. Whereas they've got the tround bottling on both, but it's straight-sided on the 12, whereas on the Fire and Cane flares out at the top, just makes it that little bit chunkier. Getting a little bit of extra chunk for your money. As for the specs on this one, it's no age statement, as we probably expect. It's almost certainly coloured, probably quite a bit. It's definitely chill filtered. I haven't looked that up, but it just is, you know it is. It's probably also very young, and that's a judgment both from the price and the presentation of this, as well as my reflection on the tasting notes of this. In my humble opinion, it's probably very young, but it is 43% ABV, which is kind of an achievement for Glenfiddich. It's good that they've decided to give us that little bit extra to try and carry those flavours. It also kind of hints that they know that it's something that they need to do, that the kind of adventurous single malt drinker that might be interested in this, they're looking for a higher ABV to carry those flavours. So they know what they're doing. This Glenfiddich Fire and Cane, it sells for around £40, but as I said, this has made it to the UK supermarkets, so providing you can still find this in the supermarkets, you'll almost certainly be able to get this for quite a bit less. So let's get some in the glass. They have decided to go all out for the premium wooden CNC milled Glenfiddich logo. Natural wood stopper on this one as opposed to the plastic on the 12. No expenses spared except for the fact that it's a crappy composite cork. I do like the presentation though. I'm not 100% sold on these. Well, I thought that was a sticker, but that looks like it might be screen printed onto the bottle. But colour scheme's good. Clear glass is a nice change. Nice stopper, nice label, nice tube. It's nice. Let's leave that out. So Glenfiddich Fire and Cane on the nose. Peated. Quite peated. Much more peat than I would expect from something advertised as a peated Glenfiddich. It possibly shouldn't be that much of a surprise because obviously Glenfiddich is owned by Grants, who also own Balvenie, and Balvenie have their own floor maltings, and they obviously do their Balvenie Week of Peat or Peat Week, I can't remember which it's called, but the William Grants Group, they are not new at making peated whiskey. It's just not something that they're known for. But yeah, on the nose of this one, sweet and sour. Now, I think that really sets you up for the rest of the whiskey, because this is a whiskey of contrasts. You're getting lovely, sweet, sugary rum and raisin notes from those rum casks. Some nice, sweet and savoury orangey notes. Some nice, sweet custard. And then completely contrasting to that, absolutely diametrically opposed, you're getting some really young and very punchy peated malt. Lots of notes of things like engine fumes, a little bit industrial. There's a note of sweet and smoky barbecue sauce on the note of this one, as well as some surprisingly medicinal notes for a Glenfiddich. Getting some notes of germaline and deep heat. And the peat is quite peppery as well. A farmy, peppery, sooty peat. So, it's a ballsy one. It's got character. So Glenfiddich Fire and Cane. Let's see how it tastes. I'll make no apologies. I really enjoy this one. Surprisingly enjoyable. I didn't expect to like it this much. I do think that the colour of this one that I just showed you probably does back up that it's artificially coloured, but it's a nice little peated experiment from Glenfiddich. On the palate, getting sweet honeyed malt, and again immediately contrasted with some really nice ashy wood smoke, some farmy peat. Actually getting notes of cow sheds in there, alongside some sweet vanilla cream and raisin notes, some sweet honey, and that trademark Glenfiddich apple. As for the finish on this one, they have given us an extra 3%, which should help with the length of the finish and the body on this one, and I think it does. I think that the length of the finish, I'm going to go medium long, and it's all about that farmy ashy peat with a slightly bitter oaky edge, and some really nice, reasonably heavily peated maltiness. As for a grade, I'm going to go with a B- on this one, which is, if you remember, the grade that I would have given the 12-year-old, but I do think that slipped a little bit over recent years. Me personally, I would rather buy, if the price was the same, I would rather buy this peated rum cask Glenfiddich over the standard 12 these days. But obviously, this Glenfiddich Fire and Cane, it's good in entirely different ways than the Glenfiddich 12-year-old. It's a very, very different whiskey. Going back to what I said before, I do think that this is an obviously young whiskey, but I think Glenfiddich have been very clever with this one. And I almost think that the way that this whiskey is, what they've created here, and the way it works, it kind of needs to be at least moderately young for the peat to work, for it to really pull off that young and feisty peat. And going back to what I said about this being a whiskey of contrasts, it's kind of a whiskey of two halves. It has two distinct characters that it constantly flips between on you. But I think that it's so well made and very cleverly put together. It would have been incredibly easy for this not to work, and I kind of expected it not to, but it does. As for the peat that goes into this one, that really ballsy, young, character-filled peat, I don't know if the Balvenie floor maltings are producing the peated malt for this one. It's possible that they just stick to their unpeated malt on the floor maltings and they buy the peated stuff in from somewhere else, I don't know. But hats off, really hats off to whoever is making the peated malt for this one, because it's got absolutely bags of character, and I would love to see this at 50%. I actually think that it'd really give the Balvenie Peat Week a really good run for its money. As for other things that you can compare this to, I think that if you did bottle this at a higher strength, say 50%, this could easily pass for something like a young Bunnahabhain Munya. As it is at the 43%, I think that it's a very pleasant and very unique little peated whiskey with just enough body and intensity to make it pass. Anyone that's considering taking the plunge on this one, it's not hugely expensive, especially if you can get it on offer, which, to be honest, a lot of people are going to have special offers available to them on this one. I think that if you're the kind of person that's okay with the slightly ugly, oddball notes that you get from something like a young Talisker or a young peated Bunnahabhain, then you'll probably like this, providing that slightly lowish ABV doesn't put you off. So let me know what you think in the comments of this one if you've had it. And if you are considering it but you've just been put off because it seems like a low-end Glenfiddich, I actually would encourage you to at least seek out a sample of this one and give it a go. Thanks for watching, and cheers.